Some hurts are invisible, yet they cut deeper than anything physical ever could. What happens when you give everything to those you love, and in return, they turn their backs on you? In this story, Helen, a mother and grandmother, tries to reconnect with her family, only to be crushed by the very people she thought would cherish her. But what if the greatest strength comes from standing up in silence, and the quietest acts of revenge are the most powerful? Let me take you through this journey. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The story starts now. I've always believed that family was supposed to be everything. Growing up, my own family wasn't perfect, but I had my parents, my siblings, and a bond that felt unbreakable. When I married Tom, we promised we'd create something even stronger, something that would last for generations. But when Tom passed away last year, I felt like the foundation of my life crumbled right beneath my feet. I was left alone, no husband, no sense of direction. And so I began to search for something, anything, that would bring a spark back into my life. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could rekindle something with my daughter, Amanda. She was my only child, and after all, she had her own family now, her husband, Ben, and their 2 kids. I wanted to feel like I was still needed, still relevant in their lives. So when Amanda and Ben bought a new house, I didn't think twice. I paid off their mortgage, the entire thing, all at once. It was my gift to them, a way to show I cared, a way to show I was still part of their world. It wasn't just money. It was a symbol that I was still there, still a mother, still a part of their family. But what did I get in return? Ben, the son-in-law I'd always thought of as kind, as someone who'd never hurt me, looked at me one afternoon and said, "You smell like a hospital. Please, don't sit on our new couch." I froze. The words sliced through me, cold and sharp. It was a small thing, sure, but in that moment, it hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. That sofa was new, yes, but it wasn't the sofa I was focused on. It was the way he looked at me, the way he spoke to me, as if I didn't matter, as if I was some inconvenience. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, but instead, I forced a smile and left the room. That's what a mother does, right? She sacrifices. She puts her own feelings aside for the good of her children. At least, that's what I always told myself. As I walked out of their living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had snapped. I had given them everything. I had given them my love, my money, my time. And this was how they repaid me? With disdain? With coldness? It was more than I could bear, but what could I do? I was just their mother. I was just the person who had helped them, who had tried to build a bridge between us. That night, I stayed in my own home, alone. I cried, not for what had happened that day, but for the years I had spent giving everything of myself to my family, and yet feeling like I had nothing left to show for it. The next few weeks were even worse. Ben didn't change, didn't apologize. Amanda didn't even acknowledge it. But every time I went to their house, I could feel the distance growing between us. It wasn't just the physical space, the couch that I wasn't supposed to sit on. It was the emotional distance. I was an outsider in my own family, and worse, I was invisible. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to find a way back into their hearts. But with every passing day, it felt like the door was closing more tightly, and with every cold interaction, I could feel my heart slowly breaking. But one thing was becoming crystal clear. I was no longer willing to accept this. I had been giving, sacrificing, and loving for years, only to be met with cruelty and disregard. And the worst part? No one cared. No one noticed how much it hurt. Not Amanda, not Ben, not anyone. And then, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. If I wanted to be seen, if I wanted to be respected, I couldn't keep being the person who just gave and gave. I needed to change, and I would change. But the question was, how? I stood in my living room, staring out the window at the empty street outside. The cold wind whipped through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to take this anymore. I didn't know how yet, but I would make them see me. I would make them respect me. I wasn't just Helen anymore. I was someone different now, and I'd start showing them. The days that followed were a blur of silent torment. I went about my life, but it was as if everything had changed overnight. I had tried, for so many years, to be the good mother, the supportive mother-in-law, the grandmother who was always present, always available. I had sacrificed so much never asking for anything in return, believing that the love and appreciation I gave would one day come back to me, like a warm, comforting embrace. But that day, when Ben spoke those cruel words, it shattered me. It wasn't just the insult. It was the realization that despite everything I had done for them, despite the years I'd spent building a life of support and love, I was just an inconvenience, a burden, nothing more. And Amanda, my own daughter, she never once stepped in to defend me. Not when Ben said I smelled like a hospital, not when he asked me to leave their living room. It was as if she was blind to the hurt he was causing. I had always thought that she was my ally, my greatest support. I thought she would understand how much that comment had cut into me. But she didn't. She said nothing. She pretended like it wasn't happening. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself avoiding visits to their house. It was the only way to protect myself from the pain, but avoiding them only deepened the ache in my chest. I missed my grandchildren. I missed the times when our family had been whole, when laughter filled the air and our lives felt connected. Now, there was only silence. No one called, no one checked in. It felt like they were all just going on with their lives while I was left to fade into the background. I was a ghost in my own family. I spent more time alone in my own house where I could cry in peace. I didn't want to burden anyone with my pain, so I held it all inside. But with every passing day, the weight of it grew heavier. I felt as though I was suffocating, drowning in my own thoughts, unable to find a way out. I wondered where I went wrong, what I could have done differently to be seen, to be loved. But the answer was always the same. I had given everything, and yet it had never been enough. One evening, I sat in the living room, looking out at the darkened street. The silence in my home was suffocating. The emptiness echoed through the walls. My thoughts began to spiral, and I found myself wondering, what if I stopped giving? What if I stopped being the one who always bent over backward to please everyone? What if I just stopped? The idea took root in my mind, like a seed planted in fertile soil, growing with each passing moment. I knew I could never change what had already happened, but I could control how I responded. I could stop being the doormat, the one who just took the pain without ever pushing back. But how could I do that? How could I take back control of my life when it felt like my family had already turned their backs on me? That night, I decided I would stop being the victim. I wasn't going to let this happen to me anymore. I wasn't going to beg for their attention or affection. I was going to make them see me, not just as the person who gave them everything, but as someone who deserved respect. But I had to be strategic. It wasn't going to be enough to just confront Ben directly. That wouldn't work. No, I had to play this carefully. I had to be patient. And so, I began my plan. The weeks dragged on, and with every passing day, the distance between me and my daughter grew. It wasn't just Ben's cruelty that was driving a wedge between us. It was Amanda's silence. Her refusal to acknowledge the pain he was causing me was just as painful as the insults Ben had hurled my way. Every time I walked into their home, I felt the coldness in the air. It wasn't just the absence of warmth in their greeting. It was something deeper, something that gnawed at my soul. I started noticing the little things, the way Ben would glance at me with that look of condescension, like I was an unwanted guest, the way Amanda would act as if everything was perfectly fine, even when I could see the cracks in their marriage starting to show. She would smile at me, but it wasn't real. It was a mask, a facade that I knew all too well. It hurt more than I can put into words to realize that my own daughter didn't see me. She didn't notice the way Ben treated me, the way he dismissed me like I was nothing. Maybe it was easier for her to pretend. Maybe it was simpler to ignore the truth, to just go along with the charade. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was like living in a house of glass. One wrong move, and everything would shatter. I remember one afternoon, I went over to visit them, eager to spend time with my grandchildren. It was supposed to be a simple, happy visit, but when I walked through the door, I was met with a sense of isolation that hit me like a wall. Ben was on the couch, flipping through a magazine, not even bothering to look up. Amanda was in the kitchen, her back to me as she prepared dinner. No hello, no, how are you, Mom? Nothing. I stood there in the doorway, unsure of what to do. But I was about to say something, but then I remembered Ben's words from that fateful day. You smell like a hospital. The memory of it clung to me, and I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me once again. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and walked into the kitchen. Amanda barely acknowledged me, her eyes flicking to me for a moment before she turned back to what she was doing. It was like I wasn't even there. Need any help? I asked, trying to sound casual. Amanda didn't even pause. No, Mom. I'm fine. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself not to break down right then and there. This wasn't supposed to be how it was supposed to be. I had envisioned this time with my daughter and grandchildren to be filled with love and warmth, but all I felt was an overwhelming sense of rejection. Ben, who had been sitting on the couch, got up and walked into the kitchen. He didn't even glance at me, just brushed past me like I wasn't worth acknowledging. I could feel my heart sinking with every step he took away from me. It was in moments like this that the truth became undeniable. I was no longer a part of their world. Later, when I was leaving, Ben made a point of opening the door for me with a smile that felt more like a sneer. "Take care, Helen," he said, his voice dripping with insincerity. It was as if he were doing me a favor by letting me leave. Amanda stood in the background, arms crossed, not saying a word. She didn't have to. The silence between us spoke louder than anything she could have said. I didn't cry when I got in the car. I was too tired for that, but the weight of it all settled over me like a blanket, suffocating me with its intensity. I felt small. I felt invisible. I felt like I didn't matter anymore. It wasn't the first time I'd been treated this way, but this time, something inside me snapped. I had given everything to them. My love, my time, my money, and this was how they treated me? The truth was, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I wasn't going to beg for their love. I wasn't going to wait around to be seen. No, I had to do something. I had to make them see me. I wasn't going to sit in silence and let this continue. But what could I do? The answer came to me slowly, over the course of the next few days. It wasn't about being loud or aggressive. No, it was about being smart. It was about hitting them where it hurt the most. They had no idea how much power I still had. But I knew, and I was going to make sure they knew too. I would make them see me, and when they did, they would regret ever treating me the way they had. The decision to change wasn't easy. For so many years I had played the role of the dutiful mother, always sacrificing, always giving. But now, standing on the precipice of my own despair, I realized I had been the one allowing myself to be pushed aside. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had accepted Ben's cruelty without a second thought. I'd done everything for them, and yet they couldn't see me. They couldn't even offer me a simple word of gratitude or kindness. It was as though I was invisible in their lives, a ghost they barely noticed. I wasn't going to stand by and let that continue. It had been months since Ben's cruel words, but the sting of them hadn't faded. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. "You smell like a hospital." Those words rang through my mind like a bell, reminding me that I wasn't enough for them, not enough to be respected, not enough to be valued. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to keep allowing myself to be treated this way. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the anger I felt. It was the realization that I still had power. I'd been so focused on making them happy, on playing the role of the selfless mother and grandmother, that I had forgotten about myself. I had forgotten about my own needs, my own desires, my own worth. No more. I sat down at my kitchen table late one night, the weight of the decision settling into my bones. I could have confronted them directly. I could have yelled and screamed, told them how badly they had hurt me, but I knew better. I knew that wouldn't work. Ben wasn't the type to listen to reason. And Amanda, well, Amanda had her own struggles. Confrontation would only push them further away. But if I hit them where it hurt, if I made them feel the consequences of their actions, they would finally notice me. They would have no choice but to see the woman they had been taking for granted all this time. I started to think about all the sacrifices I'd made for them over the years, the mortgage I had paid off for their house, the times I had picked up the pieces for Amanda when she needed me, the countless hours I had spent making sure their lives ran smoothly. And what did I get in return? Nothing but coldness and disdain. I couldn't undo the past, but I could change how I was going to respond from here on out. I had to take control of my life again. I had to stop being the victim, stop waiting for them to change, and start making the changes myself. The first thing I decided to do was stop paying the mortgage. I had been covering the entire amount for months, thinking it was a way to help them, a way to show my love. But I had been wrong. I wasn't helping them. I was enabling them, enabling their disrespect. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I had always been a woman who believed in family, in helping those you loved, no matter the cost. But what good was my help if it was only being used as a tool to control me, to keep me in the background? They didn't appreciate me. They didn't even see me. And that needed to change. So I stopped paying the mortgage, just like that. The following weeks were tense, but I kept my resolve. I refused to call or check in. I didn't want to know what was happening in their lives anymore. If they wanted me, they would have to come to me. They would have to see me, really see me, for the first time in years. At first, nothing happened. The phone didn't ring, the doorbell didn't ring, and I didn't hear from Amanda or Ben. But then, slowly, things began to change. I could feel it in the air. I knew that they were starting to feel the pressure. The silence between us was deafening, and I wasn't sure how much longer they could ignore the growing rift. But I wasn't going to give in. I wasn't going to be the one to break the silence. I had done enough for them, given enough of myself. It was their turn now. They had to come to me. I knew that this was just the beginning. I had taken the first step in regaining control of my life. But there was still more to be done. There was still more they needed to learn, and I wasn't going to stop until they learned it. I wasn't just Helen anymore. I wasn't just the mother who gave and gave. I was someone who would no longer tolerate being overlooked, disrespected, or taken for granted. I would make them see me, and when they finally did, it would be too late for them to turn back. It's amazing how silence can be the most powerful tool in a situation. At first, I was unsure of myself, unsure of how to carry out this new path I had chosen. But the more I stepped back from them, the more I realized that the silence wasn't just a withdrawal, it was a message louder than any argument or confrontation could ever be. I watched them, Amanda and Ben, drift further into their own lives as the days passed. They probably thought I had forgotten about them, that I had given up, but I hadn't. No, I was watching closely, calculating every move, every shift in the air. They didn't know it, but I was already 3 steps ahead. I made sure to keep my distance, but I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had turned into something more focused, something more controlled. They didn't deserve my anger. They deserved something else, a lesson. They had taken me for granted for far too long, and now it was time for them to feel the consequences. The first signs that they were starting to notice came in the form of missed calls. I wasn't the one reaching out anymore. I had stopped doing that long ago. Now, when the phone rang, I looked at the number and let it go to voicemail. Amanda, I knew, was calling, probably to ask why I hadn't paid the mortgage, to ask what was going on. But I didn't want to talk to her. Not yet. Not until she came to me, truly came to me, and understood what she had been doing all this time. Ben, of course, didn't bother calling. He never did, unless he needed something, unless he was trying to manipulate his way into getting what he wanted. I knew that very well. He was always so calculating, so selfish. The moment he realized the mortgage wasn't being paid, I knew he would try to put pressure on me. But I wasn't going to give in. Not this time. I had a lot of time to think during these days of silence. I reflected on everything. The way Ben had disrespected me, the way Amanda had stood by and said nothing. And I began to realize something important. I had been letting them control the narrative for far too long. I had always been the one trying to make peace, always trying to patch things up, always putting their needs above my own. But it was never enough. I had never been enough for them, and that was the bitter truth. And then I thought about the choices I had left. I could continue to let them walk all over me, continue to be the person they could rely on only when they needed something. Or I could stand firm and force them to see me, to recognize my worth. I decided I would stand firm. The silence was working. Every day that went by without a word from me, I felt a small victory. I could see it in the way Amanda would hesitate when she walked past my house, as if unsure whether to knock on the door. I could hear it in the way the silence between us grew heavier. The longer they ignored me, the more they would start to feel it. The more they would realize just how much I had been giving and how little they had been appreciating. It wasn't long before I got my first text from Amanda. It was short, almost cold. "Mom, is everything okay? Why aren't you answering your phone?" I smiled to myself as I read it. She had finally noticed, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't going to give in just yet. Not until she truly understood what had been happening. I didn't reply to her text right away. Instead, I went about my day, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. For once, I wasn't at their mercy. I wasn't begging for their attention. I was controlling the narrative now. The next day, another message came through from Amanda. This time, there was a hint of urgency. "Mom, please talk to me. We need to figure this out. Ben is upset about the house payments." That was it. She was finally starting to see the cracks in the foundation of their perfect little world. The first real sign that they were beginning to feel the pressure. But Ben's distress didn't concern me. It never had. It was Amanda's reaction that mattered. She was the one who needed to come to terms with what had been happening all along. I let another day pass, letting the silence linger between us. When I finally did respond, it wasn't with an answer to her concerns. I didn't owe her that, not yet. Instead, I simply replied, "When you're ready to listen, we can talk." And just like that, the ball was in her court. I could feel it in the air, the tension thickening between us, building with every passing moment. Amanda's texts had become more frequent, more desperate. She couldn't avoid the growing distance any longer. She was starting to feel the strain of her life unraveling, bit by bit. But Ben? He didn't seem to notice at first. I didn't expect him to. He was always too wrapped up in his own desires, his own ego, to pay attention to the cracks forming in his perfect world. But the day came when Ben finally reached out to me. It wasn't a phone call. No, he wasn't going to speak to me directly. Ben was too proud for that. Instead, he sent a message, and that message was everything I needed to hear. "Why aren't you paying the mortgage?" it read, blunt and to the point. "You know Amanda and I have a lot of expenses. We can't afford to keep the house without your help." The audacity of it, the nerve. I wasn't sure if I should laugh or cry. I had given them everything I could for years, helping with bills, picking up their slack, paying for things they couldn't afford. But now, in this moment, he was treating me like an ATM, like I existed only to serve their needs. And now that the money wasn't flowing as freely as it once had, he was demanding answers. I had to pause for a moment. I wasn't going to respond rashly. Not now. I had already started this process of silence, of distancing myself from them, and I wasn't about to break it. I knew he was getting desperate. The more he needed something from me, the more he'd push, the more he'd try to manipulate me. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I stared at my phone, wondering if I should say something, anything. But then I remembered what I had been telling myself. I wasn't the one who had been wrong here. I hadn't been the one to disrespect them. I wasn't the one who had turned a blind eye to the injustices they had inflicted on me. I had been the one who was always there, who always gave. And now? Now, it was their turn to come to me. So I replied, but not the way he wanted me to. "Maybe you should talk to Amanda," I wrote, keeping it calm, measured. "This isn't about the mortgage. It's about respect, something I haven't received much of lately." I put the phone down and breathed a sigh of relief. The silence after sending that message was almost deafening. I was waiting for the storm to hit. I knew Ben wasn't going to let this go easily. He couldn't. He had been living off my generosity for far too long. Now that it wasn't coming, he had no idea how to deal with it. The next few hours passed in a tense quiet. I could almost feel the anxiety radiating off of him through the phone. But I didn't hear from him again that night. I went to bed with a sense of power, the first real sense of power I had felt in a long time. But the next day, the storm came. Amanda's call was more frantic than I had expected. "Mom, please, you can't just stop paying for the house. Ben is furious, and we're going to lose everything if you don't help us." Her voice trembled, and I could hear the panic in her tone. But I didn't give in. This wasn't about the house or the money anymore. It was about the deeper issue, respect. They had taken me for granted for so long, and now that I wasn't enabling them anymore, they were reeling. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds before I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not going to be your safety net anymore, Amanda," I said. "You and Ben need to figure this out. You need to stop treating me like I'm just here to solve your problems." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, trying to compose herself. Then softly, almost apologetically, she spoke. "I know you're upset," she said, "but Ben doesn't understand. He doesn't know how to handle all this pressure, and I don't know what to do anymore." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at the situation, at how Ben had manipulated everything around him, at how Amanda had let him get away with it. But what could I do? I couldn't fix this for her. She had to fix it herself. You need to stand up to him, I told her. You need to stop allowing him to treat you like this. But no, Amanda. You need to be stronger than this. You need to take control of your life. I can't do that for you anymore. The line went silent, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if she was even going to respond. But then she did, her voice small and fragile. I'll try, she whispered. I hung up the phone feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But Amanda had to make her own decisions now. She couldn't keep using me as a crutch to avoid the truth. The stage was set now. Ben's desperation was only going to grow. And when he pushed hard enough, I would be ready. But for now, I had to let him feel the weight of his own actions. I had already given them everything I could. Now, they had to see the cost of their neglect. The days that followed felt like a pressure cooker slowly reaching its boiling point. Ben was no fool. The moment he realized I wasn't going to bail him out, the full extent of his temper began to show. The messages and calls from Amanda continued to pour in, but it wasn't the frantic, pleading messages that got to me. It was Ben's silent retaliation that made my stomach churn. At first, the silence between us was a sort of weapon. It was calculated, but the more I watched Amanda struggle with it, the more I realized that the silence was no longer enough. Something else was happening beneath the surface, something that I hadn't fully understood before. Ben was beginning to show his true colors, and it wasn't pretty. It started with little things, but I began to notice them all. Amanda would mention offhandedly that Ben seemed more on edge lately, more irritable, more distant. She didn't seem to connect it to the fact that he was losing control over his life. He couldn't fix the house without my money. And Amanda, for all her attempts to pretend it wasn't happening, was starting to feel the cracks too. Ben would bark at her over small things, nothing major, just sharp words here and there. The same words he used on me, only now they were directed at her. I remember one evening, I decided to check in on my grandchildren, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I could still be part of their lives in some way, even if it was through the smallest of gestures. When I arrived at their house, I could feel the tension in the air even before I walked through the door. Amanda was in the kitchen, her back to me, trying to get dinner ready. The kids were playing in the living room, but the moment I stepped inside, the house seemed eerily quiet. Ben was sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Not a greeting, not a hello, not even a glance. I could feel his resentment like a heavy cloud, suffocating everything around me. I wanted to leave. I really did. But something inside me held me there. I wasn't going to let him chase me away. Not anymore. I had every right to be there, and I wasn't going to let him make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. Amanda, do you need help with dinner? I asked, trying to break the silence. But she didn't answer. She didn't even turn around. I could hear the faint sound of Ben's voice from the living room, snapping at the kids to be quieter, his tone sharp, like broken glass. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The tension in the house was palpable. This wasn't the home I had once imagined for my daughter, the one filled with warmth and love. This place felt suffocating, full of anger and fear. Amanda, honey? I called again, a little louder this time. She finally turned, her face drawn and tired, her eyes avoiding mine. She was a shell of the woman I once knew, the woman who had smiled with joy and love when I'd visit, who had shared everything with me. Now there was nothing but exhaustion in her face, a weariness that made me want to take her in my arms and protect her from whatever she was going through. But I couldn't do that, not anymore. Mom, she sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. I don't know what to do. Ben, he's just so angry all the time. He's not the man I married anymore. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but she held them back. I wanted to rush over to her, tell her everything was going to be okay, that I would fix it, that I could fix him. But I couldn't. She had to find the strength to fix it herself. You have to stand up for yourself, Amanda, I said, my voice low but firm. You can't let him treat you like this. You deserve better. She shook her head. I can't. I don't know how. He's changed, and I don't know how to handle it anymore. I looked over at Ben, still glued to his phone. He didn't even care that I was standing there. He didn't care that his wife was breaking down. He was too focused on his own problems to see what was happening right in front of him. It was clear that Ben didn't just disregard me. He disregarded everyone. He was so consumed by his own need for control and power that he couldn't see the devastation he was leaving in his wake. "I know you're scared, Amanda," I said quietly, my heart breaking for her. "But you don't have to be scared anymore. You don't have to let him keep controlling you. You are stronger than you think." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Amanda finally looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in a long time. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, something more than just exhaustion. It was hope. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. The look she gave me told me everything I needed to know. Amanda was starting to wake up. She was starting to realize that this wasn't the life she deserved, and maybe, just maybe, she could find the strength to change it. But before she could respond, Ben's voice boomed from the living room, interrupting the moment. "Are you done in there yet, Amanda? The kids are waiting to eat." I saw Amanda flinch at his tone, and my heart twisted. I wanted to do something, to stand up to him, to tell him off right there and then. But I didn't. Not yet. This was Amanda's battle, not mine. "I'm coming," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. As she walked past me, I put a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be afraid of him, Amanda. You have the power to change this. You just have to believe that." And with that, she nodded, though I could see the conflict in her eyes. I didn't know if she would find the strength to do what needed to be done, but I had to believe she would. As I left their house that night, I could feel the shift in the air. Ben's influence was beginning to slip, and though it would take time, I knew that Amanda was beginning to see him for what he truly was. But the question now was, would she find the courage to stand up to him before it was too late? I had done what I could. I had offered the words of wisdom, the encouragement, the support. But deep down, I knew this was Amanda's fight now. It was her life, her marriage, her decision whether to stand up to Ben. But as each day passed, the weight of the situation pressed harder against my chest. The more I saw the cracks forming in their relationship, the more I realized that if Amanda didn't make a choice soon, the consequences would be too great. I couldn't just stand by anymore and hope for the best. I couldn't let Ben keep abusing my daughter, emotionally and mentally. I had seen the way he treated her, the way he manipulated her, the way he tore her down a little more each day. His cruel words had only gotten worse, and I wasn't blind to the marks he left on her. Not physical ones, but the emotional scars that were starting to pile up. Amanda wasn't just sad anymore. She was lost, and it crushed me to see it. I had raised her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to fight for what was right. Yet here she was, trapped in a marriage with a man who used his power to break her down. Ben had broken her in ways that weren't visible to the eye, but I could see it. I could feel it in the way she walked around with her head down, the way she hesitated before speaking, the way she second-guessed every decision. She was suffocating under the weight of a man who had no respect for her, and worse, I had let it happen. I had stood by for too long, waiting for her to find the courage to break free on her own. But now, after everything, I realized it wasn't enough, not anymore. And that's when I made the decision I had been circling around for weeks. I couldn't save Amanda from herself, but I could save her from Ben. I would not sit idly by while he continued to manipulate her. It was time to take a stand. It was time to do what needed to be done, even if it was drastic, even if it meant crossing a line I hadn't considered before. I picked up my phone and made the call. James. A name I hadn't uttered in years, but someone who, if I was honest with myself, had always been there, lurking in the background, waiting for me to make a move. James wasn't the kind of man you called unless you were desperate. He was a former private investigator, now working outside the law, solving problems for people who didn't want to get their hands dirty. He had a reputation for getting results, but not through kindness or diplomacy. He was, as the saying goes, a fixer. I hadn't wanted to go to him. I had thought I could handle this on my own, that the situation would resolve itself if I gave it time. But I had misjudged just how deeply Ben's control ran. I could see now that my daughter wasn't going to get out of this mess on her own. I needed someone who could send a message without the need for words. When James picked up, I didn't waste any time. "James," I said, my voice steady, calm, but determined. "I need a favor, something drastic." He listened, as he always did, without interrupting. By the end of our conversation, he understood what I needed from him. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer advice. He simply agreed, and that was all I needed. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no turning back now. I had made my choice. The next few days were filled with an eerie sense of calm. I didn't hear from Amanda or Ben. They were in crisis mode. I knew. Ben was angry, more angry than usual, and Amanda was trying to hold everything together. I watched from a distance as their world crumbled, as Ben's control over Amanda started to slip. But I also saw something else, a flicker of light in Amanda's eyes, a sign that she was beginning to see through the facade. She wasn't fully ready to break free yet, but she was beginning to question things. I could tell. And then, one evening, James made his move. I wasn't there when it happened. I didn't need to be, but I knew he had done what was necessary. I had trusted him to send a message loud and clear, without causing irreparable harm. And he did. It was subtle, but effective. Ben would understand the message immediately. The next day, I received a call from Amanda. Her voice was shaky, but there was a new sense of clarity in it. "Mom, I don't know what happened, but I'm scared. Ben, he's different. Something's not right." I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I responded. "Amanda," I said softly, "it's time. You need to stand up for yourself. You need to take control of your life." She was silent for a long moment, and I could feel the weight of her decision hanging between us. But then, finally, she spoke. "I don't know if I can. Mom, I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are," I said, my voice firm, reassuring. "You are stronger than you know." I didn't need to say anything more. She knew what she had to do. It was only a matter of time before she made her choice, before she found the courage to walk away from Ben for good. The silence, the pressure, the emotional toll, everything was building toward this moment. And now, I could only wait and watch as Amanda found the strength she needed to break free. I had done what I could. I had set things in motion. And now, the rest was up to her. The tension that had been building for weeks finally came to a head. I had watched, patiently waiting, knowing that Amanda would have to make her decision soon. I had set things in motion, but ultimately, it was up to her. I couldn't make the choice for her. I couldn't fix her marriage for her. But I had given her the tools. I had given her the push she needed. And now, I just had to wait for her to act. The phone call came on a Friday afternoon. It was Amanda, her voice shakier than usual. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she whispered, as though afraid someone might hear her. He's out of control. I don't even know who he is anymore." I felt a lump form in my throat. My heart broke for her, but this was the moment I had been waiting for. The tipping point had arrived. "Amanda, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, steady. "You don't have to keep living like this. You have the strength to leave, to take back control of your life. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm here. I'll help you." There was silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought maybe she hadn't heard me. Maybe she was still too scared to take the leap. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "I can't do it, Mom. I can't leave him. What if he's right? What if I can't make it on my own?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I had to be strong for her. She needed to hear me, truly hear me, in this moment. "Amanda," I said, my voice soft but resolute. "He's not right. He's been controlling you, manipulating you, breaking you down. And you've let him. But you don't have to anymore. You are stronger than this. I'm not going to let you stay in a relationship where you're constantly being hurt." I heard her breathe shakily, like she was about to break down, and for a moment, I thought she might. But then, something shifted in her tone. It was subtle, but it was there. "I'm scared, Mom. I don't know if I can do this without losing everything. He'll fight me. He always does." I could feel the weight of her fear, but I also knew that this fear wasn't stronger than the need for her to be free. "You have more than just fear on your side," I said, the words coming from a place deep inside me. "You have the truth. You have your own strength. And most of all, you have me. You're not alone, Amanda. You don't have to keep letting him control you. I'll be right here, every step of the way." There was another long silence, but this time, when Amanda spoke again, I heard something different in her voice. It was a crack in the wall she had built up around herself, a hint of resolve. "I'm going to do it," she said, her voice trembling but stronger than before. "I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to take control back." I felt a rush of relief wash over me. It wasn't a victory yet, not completely, but it was a start. Amanda had taken the first step. She was ready to face the truth, ready to break free from the prison she had been living in for so long. "I'm proud of you, Amanda," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're stronger than you think." She didn't say anything after that. She didn't need to. I knew that the next steps were going to be hard for her. Ben wouldn't go down without a fight. But I had faith in her. I knew that she could do this. That night, I waited for the inevitable phone call from Amanda. I knew it wouldn't come right away. There was still so much to work through. But as I sat in my living room, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but at least Amanda was no longer stuck in the darkness. The phone rang later that evening, and I jumped. It was Amanda. "Mom," she said, her voice quieter now, but with a firmness that hadn't been there before. I told him everything. I told him I couldn't live like this anymore. I said I was leaving. My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had taken control. "And what did he say?" I asked, holding my breath. He didn't take it well," she admitted, her voice strained. "He yelled, said I was betraying him, that I was making a mistake, but I didn't care. I stood my ground. I told him I was done." I closed my eyes, a wave of pride washing over me. Amanda was standing up for herself. She was finally seeing the truth for what it was, no longer blinded by fear and manipulation. "But he's not going to just let me go, Mom. I know that," she continued. "He's not going to make it easy." I sighed softly. "No, he won't. But you've taken the first step, and you're not alone. We'll figure this out together." It was then that I knew for sure. The worst was behind us. The hardest part, the part where Amanda found her voice, had already happened. Everything else was just a matter of time. Ben's control was slipping, and though he would fight to maintain it, he wouldn't win. The days following Amanda's declaration of independence were tense, but for the first time in a long while, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. She had told Ben the truth. She had told him that she was done, that she wouldn't live in fear anymore. It was a bold move, but one that set the stage for what was to come. I knew it wouldn't be easy for her. Ben was not the kind of man who let go without a fight. He had spent years manipulating and controlling, and he wasn't going to simply give up his power over Amanda without a fight. I could feel the storm brewing, but it wasn't a storm I was going to let Amanda face alone. She had taken the first step, and now it was my turn to make sure she didn't have to face it in isolation. The next time I saw her, she was different. There was a new resolve in her posture, a new light in her eyes, but I could see the toll it had taken on her. The stress, the fear. She was living in a pressure cooker, knowing Ben would retaliate. "Mom," she said quietly, sitting across from me in my living room. "He's furious. He keeps telling me I'll regret this, that I'm making a huge mistake, but I'm not going back. I can't." I looked at my daughter, my heart swelling with pride. This wasn't easy. It was never going to be easy. But she was standing strong, and that was more than I could have ever asked for. "I know it's hard," I said, my voice steady, "but you're doing the right thing. You're not making a mistake. You're taking your life back. You're strong, Amanda. You're stronger than you think." She looked down, her fingers twisting together nervously. "He's been calling and texting me nonstop. He's trying to guilt-trip me into coming back. I don't know what to do anymore, Mom. I'm scared." I reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've already made it this far. You've already broken free. The rest of it is just noise. He's trying to manipulate you, but you don't have to listen. You've set yourself free, and I'm here for you. We'll get through this." Amanda nodded, but I could see the uncertainty still clouding her eyes. It was hard. I knew that. Ben was relentless. He was angry, and anger was a dangerous thing when it came from someone who had been used to controlling others. But Amanda had made the choice, and I was going to make sure she stuck to it, no matter what. That night, when I went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over. Amanda had made her stand, but Ben hadn't even begun to fight back yet. I knew that the hardest part was still to come. The next morning, my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Amanda. "Mom," she said, her voice shaky, "I need you. He's here. Ben's here. He's outside yelling at me through the window. He says he won't leave until I come out and talk to him." My stomach clenched. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "Stay inside. Don't open the door. Don't give in to him, Amanda. You don't owe him anything. He's trying to control you." "I know, but..." "No buts, Amanda. You stand firm. Don't let him manipulate you into thinking this is your fault. You have the right to feel safe. You've done nothing wrong. There was a long pause before she spoke again, quieter now. I'm scared, Mom. He's never been like this before. I don't know what he'll do if I don't go out there. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice calm, reassuring. Listen to me. You are strong. You can handle this, and I'm on my way. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed my keys, barely remembering to put on my shoes. My mind was racing as I drove to her house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I knew that Ben wouldn't give up easily. He would try to wear her down. He would do everything in his power to break her spirit. When I arrived, I saw him. Ben was standing in the driveway, pacing back and forth, shouting at the top of his lungs. I could see the fury in his eyes, the desperation in his posture, but it was different now. I wasn't afraid of him. He was a bully, a man who used his power to control and manipulate, and now his power was slipping away, and he was desperate to claw it back. I got out of the car and walked toward him slowly, my steps measured. Ben didn't see me at first, too caught up in his own anger to notice anything else. When I spoke, my voice was calm, but I let every ounce of authority I had seep into my words. You need to leave, Ben, I said, standing a few feet from him. This is over. Amanda doesn't want you here. She doesn't want to be with you anymore, so you need to go. His head snapped toward me, his eyes narrowing with fury. This is none of your business, Helen. Stay out of it. He took a step toward me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid of him, not anymore. I'm making it my business, I replied, my voice steady. And you need to leave. Now. He stood there for a moment, seething with rage, but then he took a step back. I saw the recognition in his eyes. He realized that his usual threats, his usual manipulation, weren't going to work on me. Not this time. I wasn't going to let him control this situation any longer. I'll be back, he muttered under his breath, before turning and storming off toward his car. I watched him drive away, the relief washing over me like a tidal wave. Amanda came out of the house moments later, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. Mom, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I said softly, pulling her into a hug. You did it. You stood up to him, and you don't have to go through this alone. I felt the weight of the last few weeks lift from my shoulders as I held her. The storm wasn't over yet, but the first battle had been won. Ben had lost his control over Amanda, and no matter what he tried next, he would never get it back. The next few days passed in a tense silence. Ben had left, but the tension didn't immediately fade. It was as though a storm had just passed, and we were left standing in the wreckage, unsure of what would happen next. Amanda was no longer in the immediate line of fire, but she was still caught in the aftermath, reeling from the confrontation with Ben, still processing the reality of the life she had just chosen. She had made the decision to leave him, to stand up for herself, but now she had to follow through. The hardest part was still ahead of her, living with the aftermath of the choice she had made, and I could see the weight of that decision in her eyes, the uncertainty, the fear of what would happen when Ben realized he had lost control. But I wasn't going to let her face it alone. I was going to be there every step of the way, even if it meant going up against Ben again. Days passed without a word from him, and it was hard not to wonder what was going on in his mind. I knew Ben. I knew his type. He wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat quietly. He wouldn't just walk away. And then, the silence was broken. It was a Sunday morning when Amanda called me. Her voice was strained, her words coming in a rushed, panicked manner. Mom, she said, her breath shaky. Ben, he's gone. I don't know where he is. His stuff is gone, the car's gone, and he's not answering any of my calls. I think he's disappeared. I felt my stomach drop. A wave of dread washed over me. Ben disappearing was the last thing I had expected. I had assumed he would fight for control. But this was different. This wasn't just a man who was angry. This was something more. Are you sure he's gone? I asked, my voice tight with concern. I've checked everything, she said, almost frantic now. His clothes are gone. His things are missing from the house. I've called his phone a dozen times, but it just goes straight to voicemail. I don't know what to think. I don't know if this is some kind of game or if he's really gone. What do I do, Mom? I could hear the panic in her voice, and I felt it too. Ben's disappearance was unsettling. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how dangerous it could be. Ben wasn't the type to just vanish without a reason. He had something planned. I was sure of it, and whatever it wasn't going to be good. Amanda, I said, trying to steady my voice. You need to stay calm. Don't jump to conclusions. Ben may be trying to manipulate you again, make you think he's disappeared to control you, but we can't assume anything just yet. I paused for a moment, thinking, you need to make sure you're safe. Lock all the doors, keep the windows secure, and don't engage with him if he reaches out. We'll figure this out together. I'm scared, Mom, she said, her voice barely a whisper. What if he's dangerous? What if he's planning something? I'm here, Amanda, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this. Just stay strong, okay? The call ended, and I sat in stunned silence. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Ben's disappearance was more than just a strange event. It was a red flag, the kind of red flag that no one should ignore. I knew that the peace I had been hoping for wasn't going to come easily. Ben wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The next few hours were filled with uncertainty. Amanda kept texting me updates, but the messages were all the same. Ben hadn't come back, hadn't reached out, and there was still no sign of him. I kept trying to reassure her, trying to convince myself that Ben was just trying to make a dramatic exit to get attention. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I knew he wasn't just going to disappear without some sort of plan. As the evening wore on, I made a decision. I couldn't just sit back and wait for something to happen. I had to take control of the situation. I needed to find out where Ben had gone, what he was up to. I called James again, hoping that he could help me dig into Ben's whereabouts. James was sharp, resourceful. He knew how to get information, and I needed that. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure Amanda was safe. I need you to find Ben, I said when James answered. He's disappeared and I think he's up to something. I need to know where he is, what he's doing. I'll get on it, James said, his voice steady. I'll check into his usual places, look into his financials, see if anything's off. I'll call you as soon as I know anything. After hanging up, I sat in my living room, waiting. The house was still, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out what Ben was planning. I knew he wasn't done with Amanda, not by a long shot. A few hours later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. James had found something. Ben's been laying low, trying to make it seem like he's disappeared for good, James explained, his voice low. But I found a trail. He's been withdrawing money from his bank accounts in small increments, trying not to attract attention. And I tracked his phone. It's currently pinging off a remote location. He's staying somewhere far from the city. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Ben was plotting something. He wasn't going to let Amanda go that easily. I didn't know what he was planning, but I was certain it wasn't good. Can you find out where he is exactly? I asked, my heart racing. I'm on it, James said. I'll let you know as soon as I have more details. As I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was unfolding. Ben was out there, somewhere, plotting his next move. And Amanda? She had no idea what was coming, but I would make sure she was ready. I would make sure she was safe. The next few days felt like a waiting game. Every moment stretched longer than the last, and the anxiety that had settled in my chest never fully went away. I kept replaying every conversation, every move that Ben had made, trying to decipher his motives. James had given me the information I needed. Ben was hiding out in a remote cabin, far away from the city. I hadn't heard from him, and I knew that he wasn't the type to just disappear without a reason. He was scheming, plotting, and I had no idea what he was planning next. Amanda was still shaken by his sudden disappearance. The unknown was driving her to the edge of her nerves, and I could feel her fear creeping into our conversations. Every time she texted or called, I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. The fear of what could happen if Ben resurfaced. I had to make sure she stayed strong. She had already made the hardest choice, leaving him. But now, she had to stand firm. We both did. It was late one night when the call came. It was James. Helen, I've got the location. I found where he's been staying. I can't promise he'll be alone, but he's holed up in a cabin on the outskirts of town, just outside the woods. It's isolated, no neighbors, but it's a decent place to hide if you want to stay under the radar. I felt a cold shiver run through me. This wasn't just a man trying to get away. This was Ben making a calculated move. He was hiding out, waiting for something, waiting for Amanda to break, waiting for the right moment to get control back, and I wasn't about to let that happen. James, we can't let him come back, I said, my voice shaking with determination. He's dangerous. If he tries to come after Amanda again, I need to know. I need to be ready. I'll keep tabs on him, James reassured me. But if you want to confront him, you need to be careful. He's unpredictable. I didn't need him to tell me that. I knew Ben. I knew he wouldn't go quietly. But it wasn't just about confronting him anymore. It was about making sure Amanda was truly free from his grip. If Ben thought he could just disappear and come back when it suited him, he had another thing coming. The next morning, I called Amanda and told her what I had learned. I kept the conversation calm, despite the fire that was building inside me. I had to keep her steady, keep her from panicking. I know you're scared, I said softly. But this is it. This is the final piece. Ben's been hiding out, but he's not coming back. We're going to make sure of it. She was quiet on the other end of the line. Then finally, what do we do, Mom? I exhaled slowly, looking out the window at the horizon, feeling the weight of what had to come next. We take control. We make sure he knows that he has no power over you anymore. Later that afternoon, we headed out to the cabin. James had given me the details, the layout, the isolated nature of the place, the fact that Ben was staying there by himself, at least for now. He had gone into hiding, but there was no way we were going to let him come back into Amanda's life. No way he could continue to manipulate her. Amanda was shaking when she got into the car with me. She had been so strong up until now, but I could see how afraid she was. She wasn't sure what to expect, and honestly, neither was I. I'm not sure I can do this, Mom, Amanda whispered as we drove, her eyes wide with fear. What if he doesn't listen? What if he tries to hurt me? I took her hand and squeezed it. You've already done the hardest part, honey. You left him. You stood up for yourself. Now we just need to make sure he stays away. We're doing this together. You're not alone. The drive seemed to stretch on forever, the silence between us heavy, each of us caught up in our thoughts. I could feel Amanda's fear, but I could also feel her resolve. She wasn't going to back down. Neither of us were. When we finally arrived, I knew this was it. This was the moment where we would either let Ben continue his reign of terror, or we would show him that his time was over. We approached the cabin carefully, keeping a safe distance as I checked my phone for updates from James. He had eyes on Ben, and he confirmed that the man hadn't left the cabin all day. It was now or never. Stay close, I whispered to Amanda. She nodded, her face pale but determined. I knocked on the door, my heart racing in my chest. There was a long pause, and then the sound of footsteps from inside. The door creaked open just a crack, and there he was, Ben. He didn't look surprised to see me, but there was something in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. He knew this wasn't a visit of reconciliation. He knew this was the end. What the hell do you want? He spat, his eyes flickering to Amanda behind me. We need to talk, Ben, I said, my voice steady, no trace of fear in it. This is over. You've lost control. You're not coming back into her life. Not now, not ever. Ben sneered, his hand tightening into a fist at his side. You think I'm just going to let her go? Let you take her away from me? You've made a mistake, Helen. This is far from over. I could feel the air between us crackling with tension. Ben's words were venomous, but they didn't affect me the way they once had. I wasn't the same woman anymore. I wasn't the scared mother who had let him walk all over me. I was standing here, in control, and this time, he wasn't going to win. You've already lost, I said, my voice firm. You've lost everything. Ben, your control, your manipulation. It ends here. You're not welcome in her life anymore. Ben's jaw clenched as he took a step forward, but before he could say anything, I saw something in his eyes shift. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. He was realizing that he had no more cards to play, that the power he had once held was gone. With one last venomous glare, he turned and slammed the door shut, leaving us standing there, together, in the silence that followed. We had done it. We had taken control back, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. Amanda looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and relief. Mom, it's really over, isn't it? I nodded, pulling her into a tight hug. It's over. You're free. And with that, I knew everything had changed for both of us. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.